Today's video is an overview of the process to become a green card holder or permanent resident of the United States through the family petition and then immigrant visa process. Sometimes we call this consular processing. I know in our practice, our clients find it really helpful to have that high-level view and understanding of the whole process from start to finish. So I hope to share some of that with you. Hi, I'm Soyna Tag. I'm an attorney and one of the founders of SimVisa. Our channel is about the law, U.S. immigration, and other related topics like travel and some cultural insights. If this is of interest to you and you want to know more about how the law can serve you, please subscribe. Also, if you find this helpful, please like the video and comment below, as we're definitely checking those for future videos. So let's talk about the I-130 family petition and then the immigrant visa process. So this process that we're talking about in this video is about a situation where the beneficiary, meaning the person who wants the green card, is abroad. So if the person, the beneficiary wanting the green card, is physically present in the United States, and if they qualify, then you definitely want to check out the adjustment of status process. And I'll cover that in a different video, but this one is in a situation where the person, the beneficiary, is abroad. The process starts with the filing of the form I-130, which is Petition for Alien Relative, with the USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, an agency of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. That's a mouthful. So who can file this form I-130? Well, that person is called the petitioner. And if the petitioner must be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident of the United States. Now, if the petitioner is a U.S. citizen, then that petitioner can file the form for the benefit of their spouse, their child, whether a minor child or an adult child, or their parent or their sibling, so brother or sister. If the petitioner is a U.S. lawful permanent resident and not a U.S. citizen, then it's a smaller number of categories. So the permanent resident can file the petition for the benefit of their spouse, their unmarried child, so minor or adult, but once they're married, then the permanent resident cannot file for a married child. So those are the only family relationships that are recognized that you can file an I-130 petition for. So when you file this, the purpose of the form is to not get a particular immigration benefit, but to have the U.S. government recognize that you have a real, genuine, qualifying family relationship. So what that means is that you're not filing this because, I know it's hard to imagine for most people that you don't have some fake green card marriage or you're faking a relationship with a family member or something like that, but that this is actually a genuine and real family relationship. So along with this, you're going to need to pay the filing fee. Currently, that's $535 to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And then you have to, of course, as I mentioned, provide supporting evidence. Generally speaking, that evidence would involve proving the petitioner's U.S. status, so whether a citizen or permanent resident. It would involve information about the beneficiary, so their identity and things like that. And then it would also involve evidence proving the relationship. So in the case of a spousal relationship, you would need to prove the bona fides of the marriage, that this is a real marriage and not a fake immigration marriage. And in the case of, for example, a parent, you'd want proper documentation to be able to show that there's a real parent-child relationship, whether that relationship is created through, like birth or adoption or, whatever it may be. So now, once you submit this to USCIS, the government is going to, obviously take their time to adjudicate the case. And the process basically is, once you submit it, there's going to be quite a long wait, a number of months, and they might, hopefully it ends up with an approval, or at any point in the process, the government can ask for more evidence. We call that an RFE, which is short for request for evidence. And if you receive an RFE, then of course you're gonna make sure that you answer that, within the time limit period that you're given to answer that, and that you do so very, very thoroughly. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline, because that's a lot of people have questions about the timeline. And it's surprisingly, not as simple as you would think. And I'll get into a little bit of that, but I could do an entire video or series of videos just on how USCIS does, processing time. So this is not the place for that. But just to give you an idea, for an immediate relative relationship, which means from those family relationships that I mentioned before, immediate relative would be a U.S. citizen's spouse, parent, if that U.S. citizen is an adult, so 21 or older, or minor child. So within those categories of family relationships, I can tell you that in the last couple years, the processing time for the I-130 petition for immediate relatives has been averaging around 10.2 to 12.2 months. Now, that data or that timeline is actually the median, which the government defines as about the time where 50% of the cases are adjudicated. So clearly that means there's some cases that can go faster and some cases that can go much longer. Now, on the other hand, for other family relationships, such as sibling or the married child of a citizen or other things like that, our government's position is that USCIS says that we prioritize those petitions that are actually coming due in the visa bulletin, where that category or that petition will become current. So that's a whole nother thing that I can explain probably in a different video. But a lot of these categories have a wait time. So even if the petition is approved, you can't move forward with applying for that immigrant visa until the visa bulletin, which is published every month by the Department of State, states that that date is current. So I liken it to kind of like if you take a ticket at the deli line, you have to wait and get up to the counter, you have to wait for them to call your number. So it's kind of like that. So because non-immediate relative family relationships can be subject, what we call preference categories, can be subject to this waiting time, USCIS tends to prioritize adjudicating the petitions if they know, you're becoming current. So otherwise it can become a lot longer. So for example, I wrote down a couple examples here. We'll put this, we'll link here or, in the notes below, the link to the government's official processing times, what they publish. So for immediate relatives, if you put in the specific, the I-130 for an immediate relative and, the specific service center, you're going to get the official processing time right now to be anywhere between 13 and a half to 50 months. And I know that's a humongous range. And that number is typically more like how long it takes for about 80% of the cases to be adjudicated. So, and then I'll give you another example. If you, go to the current, link for the processing times and look up, brother-sister petitions, you're going to get even a wilder range, anywhere between right now 21 to 113 months. I know that sounds absolutely crazy. And again, this is what I mean by it's a little more complicated than you would think, even a discussion of processing times, and I might be going into too much detail already for this video, so let me stop there. But all that to say, typically, especially when you're looking at kind of immediate family type relationships, I would budget around, about a year or so. Once your case hopefully becomes approved, that I-130 petition for alien relative is approved by USCIS of the US Department of Homeland Security, which would be great, then that approval gets sent over to the US Department of State. And the first place it goes to is the National Visa Center. So, by the way, I know it sounds, again, kind of weird, but that process of sending that approval from USCIS of Department of Homeland Security to the MVC, the National Visa Center of the Department of State, can take up to a couple months, which again seems kind of weird, but so don't be too worried if that happens. Hopefully it happens much faster. But once your approval arrives at the MVC, then what they're going to do is they're going to send you, the information to get your case going. And the first thing you need to do is pay the invoices that they send you, which will be for the DS-260. And so that's the application for an immigrant visa. as well as the affidavit of support fee. So the fees right now for the DS-260 are $325 currently, and then for the I-864 or affidavit of support review, that's $120. But of course, fees are subject to change, and you can check the Department of State website and see the latest fees. Now, the purpose of the processing at the MVC is not to re-adjudicate whether your family relationship is real. That was already done by, USCIS and Homeland Security. Here, they're more concerned with collecting evidence and documentation to further prove your identity, as well as to become satisfied that you are not inadmissible. So inadmissibility, which is a term of art, it's an immigration term, there are many different categories of inadmissibility, and I'll probably cover that in a separate video or many videos. But just to give you an idea, even if the relationship is real, if you have certain criminal things in your background, that might make you inadmissible. So similarly, if you have a certain health condition, such as raging tuberculosis, that would be a communicable, that's a communicable disease, then you may be inadmissible under health grounds. So there are various grounds of this, from if you commit fraud or misrepresentation, or if you have various issues of this sort, can trigger a ground of inadmissibility. So to that end, along with providing after you pay the fee, then your case is, then you can proceed and file your DS-260, which is that immigrant visa form, and then prepare the affidavit of support. In those things, you're going to provide supporting evidence that kind of show that you are not subject to some of these grounds of inadmissibility. So for example, you will need to provide, most likely, a police certificate from the countries you've lived in, and which would show that no, you do not have a criminal background that would make you inadmissible. Similarly, the affidavit of support, with that goes all of the petitioner's financial evidence, as well as, well, it can be both, but especially the petitioner's financial evidence. And this goes towards that ground of inadmissibility, that's the public charge ground of inadmissibility. So the form I-864, affidavit of support, is it's signed by, again, the U.S. petitioner, and then there can be, as the sponsor, and in some cases there can be even a joint sponsor. And this goes towards the ground of inadmissibility, that's the public charge grounds. So our government has a policy that we do not want to make someone a permanent resident of the United States who's going to be a drain on our, our public aid system, for example. So this would involve evidence from the petitioner or any other, joint sponsor that would show that there's enough financial resources to support the person. And so there you would provide evidence of that, such as like tax returns or, proof of current income or assets and things like that. So once the NVC considers your file documentarily complete, then finally it's time for your file to be at the relevant US consulate or embassy, and for that consulate to schedule your immigrant visa interview. So, by this point, you're getting close, it's really exciting, and you want to make sure that you really follow all the instructions of, the Department of State and the particular consulate to make sure that you're really ready for this. So for the interview, when you get to this stage, there's, some more things to prepare, which is, of course, your medical exam. And you can't just go to anybody. You have to go to the medical exam provider that is authorized by the U.S. consulate. And so you pick from a list, and it's just usually not too many. And then you'll go and have your medical exam, and you need to have that before the interview. And oftentimes they'll send it directly to the consulate, but again, follow all the procedures. And then you also want to make sure that you're prepared with supporting documents and any other updates and things like that for your interview. So it's also important, I would say, to also be beyond the documents, to kind of prepare for the interview And we of course do this with our clients. We go through kind of like a mock interview and go through the typical questions that are asked, and just to help the person to help you become more comfortable with what to expect at the consulate, and and the things that the officer may be particularly looking for, especially based on the specifics of your case. So, with this, hopefully if the interview goes well, your case will be approved. They will keep your passport, and then it'll take probably about a week or two to put the immigrant visa in your passport, and that immigrant visa would have a validity period of about 6 months. And during that time, you would need to use that immigrant visa to enter the United States. So that would be great. And that's how you become a permanent resident. Now, along the process though, and I would say for this whole Department of State portion, think probably at least around about 6 months. And again, the timelines can really vary depending on, there could be COVID, or there could be, different, priorities or workloads for the Department of State. But, let's say you budget about 6 months for the consular processing, and, and that would be the typical. But there are cases where the consulate also may want additional information. And in that case, of course, some of it would move very quickly, where you could go back right away and provide the necessary information and it could be resolved. But there could also be what we call like the administrative processing black hole. So, there could be things where if you go into administrative processing, it could be very short, or it could also be kind of, a very long process where you don't have much idea of, what the issue might be. And, and that's probably another video that I can talk about some cases where, that might trigger administrative processing. But either way, hopefully all goes well, and hopefully within about 6 months of, the whole consular processing, the Department of State portion, you should be, your process can be done and adjudicated, and hopefully with an immigrant visa in your passport. Then pay the USCIS immigrant visa fee. So now you finish stuff with the Department of State, and then you're going back now to Department of Homeland Security and paying the immigrant visa fee. And we recommend doing that as soon as you get your passport back with the approved immigrant visa in there. But technically, you could even do this, after you arrive in the United States. But we recommend doing it sooner than later. So that immigrant visa fee is $220, and you make that payment. And this fee allows USCIS to process your, immigrant visa, stuff, and then to issue the actual plastic card that we refer to as the green card. So again, hopefully you did that, and then you take your immigrant visa, and then within that 6 month of, the validity period of your immigrant visa, you would travel to the United States and enter. And upon entry, if all goes well, then CBP, which is the Custom and Border Protection of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, so the people like at the airports and other ports of entry, the CBP officer will stamp your immigrant visa, and once that happens and you're admitted into the United States, you are a permanent resident of the U.S. So congratulations! That's a very exciting thing. Now, of course, you're not going to have your plastic green card in hand, but that stamped immigrant visa is like your plastic green card. So, hopefully the green card comes right away, but even if it takes a while, your stamped immigrant visa is your proof that you are indeed a permanent resident of the United States. So, oh, and by the way, again, because you want to hopefully minimize the time it takes to get your green card in hand, that's why we again recommend paying that fee prior to, as soon as possible, prior to leaving the United States, certainly, and hopefully like right away after you get your immigrant visa in hand. Let me take a moment to clarify that the times I've been giving you are the government's typical processing times. So the time that they take to look at your application or petition, and then, and to adjudicate it. But there's this separate time, which is the time that you have to wait for your petition to become current, which applies to certain family relationships. So the most notorious one would be for a petition for a brother or sister of a US citizen. So for that to become current, you're looking at upwards of 15 years or longer. So as you can see, that's why it's so notorious. And if you compare that to, for example, the spouse or the minor child or the parent of an adult US citizen, there is no separate waiting time, for that like deli ticket, and they're going to call you and say it's current. The times for those immediate relative relationships, it's only just the government's processing times. As you can see, this process involves multiple steps and various government bodies touching your petition and application. So it's really important to be really very prepared, as well as to provide all the necessary information and to just make this as easy as possible for the government officers adjudicating your case each step of the way. Because it already takes a long time, and you certainly don't want to make this any longer. So that's our brief overview of the I-130 family petition and then immigrant visa process for getting a green card for the beneficiary who is abroad. So I hope you found this helpful and this gave you a clear picture of kind of the entire process. If you found this helpful, please like the video, and for more like it, please subscribe. Also, please feel free to comment below, as we're definitely checking those for future videos. So I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and I wish you the best in your immigration journey.